Welcome to the Manifestation and Money Podcast, Mitchell.
Thank you, Jenny. It's good to be here, my friend. Looking forward to having this conversation.
I am too, because apparently I'm talking to a fellow Canadian. I didn't even realize that until a couple minutes ago. So please share with the listeners just who you are and what your story is.
Yeah, well, thank you for asking me and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share because I think, a lot of people make the mistake of listening to podcasts and they think, well, these people have it figured out. They don't make mistakes. Their life didn't look like mine. But let me be the first to tell you that I learned every lesson the hardest way possible. I've done some things right. That's because I've made so many mistakes in my own life. But I'll tell you a little bit about my story just to help you understand sort of where I come from. But I was well, maybe I'll talk about my turning point really, because I think a lot of people really want to know like what made me turn it all around. I want to just kind of flip back to this would have been about 10 years ago or so. I'd always been in leadership positions and I got married and we were at this point about 3 years into marriage and I, life just kind of just tanked. Okay. I hit a total rock bottom. I found myself in a situation where I was let go of this leadership position. My identity was really wrapped up in what I did. And so I spiraled. I mean, I was 60 pounds overweight. We were 100 grand in debt. I was medicating like with drugs and alcohol every day, just trying to cope with the frustration, everything that was going on. And we had a big fight. And I had this wake up moment where my wife, we were talking about having kids. And she looked at me and she said, I would never bring a kid into this relationship. Like, why would we ever do that? At this point, it was always my dream to be a dad because I had come from dysfunction. My dad was an alcoholic. I grew up with crime and drugs and alcohol, and, all those different things, abuse. And so I was so determined to end that cycle in my family. But then my wife said, no, we're not in a good place. So for me, and that day we had a fight and she said, she used the D word, which for me, old school, I had said we would never even joke about divorce. And that day was the first day that was the biggest fight we had. And I was like, I don't know that I can fix this. And so I spent the next 6 days, we weren't talking, we were angry. And I thought I could lose everything that mattered the most to me. The second turning point was legitimately 7 days later. I was asked to sing at the funeral of this man. He was very wealthy, philanthropist. And as I was getting ready to sing the last song, I overheard the minister who was doing the funeral. He had asked the people at the funeral, he said, after sharing all the things that this man had done, he said, are you living a life worthy of imitation? If you were to die today, would you be proud of the legacy that you left? And Jenny, as I was just trying to sing the last song, I could barely choke out the lyrics because all I could think was, if this were my funeral, nobody would be saying, I want to imitate, I want to model the marriage he had. I want to model the finances I want to model health like he did. They probably would have said, you know what? He had a hard life and then it was over. Like it was very dark. It was very sad. I went home that day and I was like, you know what? I have to die to the man that I used to be in order to become the man I need to be for my wife and hopefully one day to have children. And so I went home and I made that decision and I took ownership of every part of my life. I brought 5 men around me, men who could hold me to the standard that I said I wanted. These men, my ceiling was their floor. They were living where I wanted to go. And Jenny, within a year and a half, we paid off the 100 grand of debt. We completely restored our relationship. I lost the 60 pounds, built a lean, strong body, and was clean of distractions and substances for the first time, and just dedicated my life to helping now other men do the same thing. I'm a big fan of Ed Milet, and he said on his podcast a little while ago, you're the most qualified to help the person you used to be. And so today, that's what I do. And that's why I launched the Dad Nation podcast just a couple of years ago, because I mean, every family has a curse breaker. And for me and my family, I am that curse breaker. And the best way I know how to turn that trash into treasure is to share this story and all that I've learned with the world and help men see the same transformation in their lives. And that's my story. And that's what I do.
Wow. It sounds to me like you went from being a curse breaker to a role model. You are
Mm.
now showing up in this flipped life that you have put the intention in, that you are choosing this new life to be a role model for tons of people around you.
Yeah, well, and that's really what happened. One of my first mentors, because I started helping people, like friends of mine, buddies of mine, building them budgets, helping them get out of debt, helping them reconnect with their wives, going to the gym and training them for free. And one of my buddies said, man, if you really want to take this question, are you living a life worthy of imitation? You want to take this to the next level? Start a podcast, man. Start helping people. Use that story to do something great. And that's why I did it. And then within 6 months of launching the podcast, we were at that point globally top percent or top rated podcast. I think it was the top 10%. And then I started getting listeners from around the world, and they reached out and they were like, hey, would you help me? Could you help me? So I launched my coaching practice, and that's what I do today. I help high performing men reclaim their home, their health, and their happiness without sacrificing their career success. I just help the man that I used to be. And so yeah, I'm a role model, I guess, if you put it that
Mhm.
way, to a lot of people, and it's an honor and a privilege.
When you're working with clients, and what are some, like, you had this pivotal moment of, aha, I need to get out of this pit that I've dug myself into. What are some techniques or things you walk people through who have that their own moment to be like, okay, here's what you need to start doing to get on path for what you want?
Hmm. Yeah, I think there's three big levers that you can pull. Number one is clarity. The second one is community. And the third one is coaching or mentorship. Now, I'll talk about clarity because that's the real tactical thing that we can talk about today. And my turning point was that funeral. I was faced with my mortality, right? Because I was literally looking at a casket while I was singing. And it was a powerful moment. And I had this flash forward into the legacy that I was going to be leaving. I was going to be overweight. I was going to be alone, an alcoholic, just like so many men in my family. And I had this realization, Jenny, of like, what's the point of the career success if I'm going to be sitting around the Christmas tree alone this year with my wife, in our home, and I'm renting some apartment somewhere? It doesn't mean anything. And so what I did was I wrote a eulogy from the perspective of my wife. It's a little bit meta and a little bit morbid, but it was the most sobering thing I could have ever done. And my mentor asked me to do this. He said, I want you to write out, if you were to die today, what would your wife say as she was standing over the casket? And I want you to write it from her perspective. Mitchell was a husband, a father. So what I did was I started to write that out accurately. And I was like, I don't like the story. I don't like what I'm writing down. And so when I started coaching men, I mean, we know, like Napoleon Hill talked about this all the time. Begin with the end in mind, right? Stephen Covey in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, chapter 2 is called Begin with the End in Mind. It's getting clarity about the end, right? What do you want to be known for is a big question. And so what I do with my clients, one of the first things we do is we do a eulogy exercise. I get them to write the perspective from their wife as she would be standing over his casket. And then what is that? What is your reality today? Now, the next step is if you were 100% the man, husband, father, or if you're a woman, you're listening, the woman, the mother, the wife, whatever. If you were 100% that person living 10 out of 10, your full potential capacity, what would they say about you then? Would they say you were loving? Would they say that you were the best dad? You were present. You loved your family. You gave to your community? Or would they say you worked a lot and you missed a lot of the games? You missed a lot of the recitals. You made a lot of money, but you didn't truly love anyone around you. These exercises can be so sobering. And so what we do is we take version 1 and version 2, and then we look at the difference between the two, because all the anxiety, the frustration that you have is because of this gap between the two. Because you go to sleep at night and you could do more, you could have been better, you could have done this. And this is the stuff that makes us stay awake at night, because we knew if we just went for it, if we just launched that business, if we just had that conversation, if we just did this, then we'd be more happy, right? And so we draw the line between those two. And then we say, okay, well, what does it look like? What does it look like to live that life, that 2.0 eulogy? And we reverse engineer. We get clarity on, like I said, on where we're going, who we're going to be known for. And then we reverse engineer those steps into yearly strategies, quarterly strategies, and weekly strategies of like, What are the decisions I'm making? Because we know that 95% of the decisions we make every single day are the same decisions that we made as the day before and the day before that. We live the vast majority of our lives on autopilot. And until we learn how to dig into the subconscious and question our beliefs and question why we do what we do, nothing is going to change. And that's
Hmm.
why we wake up 5 years later and life looks exactly like it did 5 years ago. And that's
Yeah.
fine if you really like it. If you love where you're at, amazing. But if you don't like where you're at, then perhaps we should change our inputs if we want to get different outputs. Otherwise, it's Einstein's definition of insanity, right? Expecting different results, but continuing to do the same thing.
Yeah. And it's a bizarre thing to watch, to see people that are kind of stuck in that Groundhog Day. Every time you bump into them, they're complaining about the same things over and over and
Yeah.
over, but they don't have that little aha moment of, wait a second, I have the power to change this. I can set the intention to have a different lifestyle.
Yeah. And I would say only you have the power.
Hmm.
Here's the thing. If you're struggling with your health and fitness or whatever, your partner, your kids are never going to take the cheeseburger out of your hands. And it sounds rough and it's aggressive. No one's going to take the chocolate bar out of your hands. Only you can do that, right?
Hmm.
If you want to have a better marriage, you have to lead the way in that. You got to have those conversations because typically life doesn't drift to become easier. It just generally drifts to become more complex, challenging when you got career, mortgage, kids, relationships, whatever, right? And I tell people all the time in the context of fitness is like, there's never going to be a pack of cheerleaders in the gym in the parking lot at 6 a.m. when you show up being like, hey, good job. Now, at some point, you got to understand that it's only you who are going to make these decisions. And therefore, it is our responsibility. And until we take ownership, like my moment after the funeral, I'm in Canada, right? After that funeral, the next day I got up and it was minus 20. Yesterday, the day before that, when I left the funeral, I said, I'm going to run a 5K tomorrow because I'm going to start. And I got up and I was faced with that. Are you going to lie to yourself again? Are you going to break another promise? Or are you going to follow through? And I was like, put on my balaclava, my toque, I layered up. And the first time I had run in over a decade was in minus 20. I made it like maybe 300 meters and started puking. Can you imagine some crazy psycho out in minus 20 puking his guts up on the side of the road? Like it was crazy. But I just knew we are exactly where we are because of the decisions we've made over the past 3 to 5 years. And so if I look at the decisions I was making in 2020 to 2023 or 2022, it makes sense as to where I am right now. And
Hmm.
here's the thing, if I want to be somewhere different in 5 years from now, I need to make different decisions, right? As we were talking about before, I need to learn how to think differently. And so that's what I started doing and taking ownership, getting clarity of where I wanted to go and not compromising on it. And then the community piece for me was that second piece of I got clarity. Now I need people to surround me. And for me, I said I had those five men who surrounded me. This was such a powerful concept that now today, even like every single one of my clients have their own Iron Five as a framework I built around this. Men who will hold them high because we self-sabotage. The imposter syndrome creeps up and you start believing old lies and you're going to fall, you're going to stumble, right? James Clear in his book, The Atomic Habits, he wrote, I think it was, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And so a system you would put into place is a community. A
Hmm.
system you would put in place is a coach or a mentor so that, yeah, you might fall, but you're not falling off the cliff. You're just stumbling a little bit and you pick yourself back up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And in that safety net too, I feel like that first exercise you do with the eulogy from your spouse, that to me, if you look through the eyes of your spouse and you strengthen that relationship you have with your spouse, all of these other little pieces become easier because then you
Hmm.
have your little support buddy along by your side that's like, okay, you can do this. You have one of your people right there that is going to be by your side, pulling you into this higher version of yourself.
Yeah, you know what's super powerful is when these men write these eulogies, I get them to read it to their spouse,
Mm-hmm.
and then they read it to me, and I'm telling you, tears, like
Mm-hmm.
powerful, powerful realizations and breakthroughs that come from that, and not to mention how it softens the heart of your spouse to know that you're humble enough and that you're being courageous enough to actually do something like this, man, that means a lot to them. And that exercise alone is going to draw you so much closer together because it softens you to one another. And that's what
Mhm.
happens in long-term relationships. We kind of harden ourselves to one another. We become roommates and we get edgy and whatever, right? And so it's a profound exercise that can transform the way you live, really.
Yeah. Yeah. To create somebody into being your biggest cheerleader instead of a roommate.
100%. And here's the thing, when we talk about, I talk a lot about men because I work with men, but men specific, especially struggle with that vulnerability piece, that transparency piece, because we were raised in a society that says real men don't cry, deal with it, right? Stuff it down. You think about it, right? We're just a few generations removed from World War II, where these men, I mean, we're thankful for their sacrifice, of course, but they came home and they didn't have resources to deal with the trauma. I mean, they saw some of the most awful things imaginable. And they came home and they didn't have healthcare plans with trauma informed psychologists. They had the bottle on the Legion or whatever they're the VA or and so they raised sons or kids and didn't necessarily give them the tools to process their emotions and they raised kids and here we are today. So we're just a couple generations removed from significant life altering trauma. And we live in a culture that says, specifically in a context of men, you're defined by what you do, not how you feel. Nobody cares about how you feel. What are you doing? Right?
Mm.
That's why one of the first questions men ask each other when we talk is, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do for work? It's never, how are you? How do you feel?
Oh,
You know what I mean? That would feel so
interesting.
counterintuitive for a man,
Hmm.
right? But a lot of women, that's one of the first questions they lead with. Hey, how are you? How are the kids? Right?
Yeah. I'm finding more and more just from listening to different podcasts that there is, I feel like this tipping point between there was like masculine and feminine. And now there's this kind of tipping point of like, oh, we are all allowed to embody these qualities.
Mm-hmm.
See so many females going out there having the 6, 7 figure businesses. And you see the men going out there going, it's okay to talk about our feelings. Like
Mm-hmm.
we're coming to this place of settling into, hey, we're allowed to embrace both of these sides of ourselves.
I love that you're bringing that up because I agree 100%. That's the entire reason why I started this movement because there's a psychological term for why men wrestle to talk about their emotions and their feelings. They wrestle with being vulnerable. And the term is called normative male alexithymia. It's a bit of a mouthful, but you can Google it. But if you break down alexithymia from the Greek, it's alexis thymos, which literally means to be without words for emotion. So if you put it all together, normative male alexithymia, it's normal for a male to be without words for emotion. And so we think about the societal pressures, the ancestral things that we've inherited, and then this just how we're wired, and that psychologists would recognize. We wrestle to with opening up. We wrestle with talking about our feelings. This is why these moments when we get clear and we write out, these eulogies and we connect with our partners, it's so powerful because it's so unusual. Another statistic that is quite alarming. We know that today in the US, 70% of divorces that are initiated by the women in the relationship, right? In a stereotypical male female relationship. And then in situations where the wife is a high earner or high has a high level of education, that number jumps to 90%. 9 out of every 10 divorces are initiated by women. This is wild. Now, what's even crazier is when they've observed the reasons for the divorce, everyone says it's kids, money, sex. It's not that at all. That's a giant fallacy. You know what it is? It's not abuse, it's not cheating. It's a lack of emotional connection
Mm.
where the wife says, I don't feel connected to you emotionally. I don't feel like I matter to you. I feel like I've married a robot. We don't talk anymore. Right. And that is because of everything I just explained. And so if you're listening to this and if you're in a long-term relationship and your partner really wrestles with opening up and talking about his feelings, understand that that's a part of the male expression, right? And that's normal. If you're a man listening and you wrestle with that, understand that that's normal, right? But our past might explain us, but it doesn't excuse us. You understand what I mean? We have, like you said, we have access to resources, podcasts, tons of different things to help connect with one another, especially men. We can be better with understanding our emotions and how to connect.
Yeah. And speaking of connection, I think this is the perfect segue for you to drop where listeners can reach out, connect with you, and carry on this conversation.
Thank you so much for asking. Yeah, honestly, if you just Google the Dad Nation, you'll see my face plastered around. But you can check out the Dad Nation podcast, which is where you'll hear from me a lot. And honestly, there's another thing that I'd love to just tell your listeners about, and it's a tool that I've created for exactly this, for people who are in relationships that are struggling to connect. It's called the Spark Starter Kit. And inside this kit, it's predominantly designed for men, but inside this kit, I say it's your romance on autopilot for an entire year. It's 365 text messages that are pre-written. All you have to do is copy and paste it, personalize it, and send it to your partner, your wife. 52 date night blueprints that are like already date nights already planned for you. All you have to do is show up and be the hero. 100 conversation starters. These are incredible because they help men with how to connect on an emotional level. And the last thing is a romance reset. It's a 3-part mini course. And that's because so often we get into these long term relationships or marriages and we begin to feel like roommates wearing rings, right? So we lose the romance. And so this romance reset course is literally designed to reset that for you. And so it's available for, I think right now is at the time of recording, it's like 17 bucks. It's super cheap, cheaper than a bouquet of flowers, which are probably going to die in a week, right? I'm giving it to the public because this was something I did in my one-to-one coaching. And the guys were like, you have to get this out to the world. It's incredible. So I've literally had women email me, like wives or partners, and be like, who was that man who took me out last night? So it's pretty cool. So you can check it out at sparkstarterkit.com, or I'll give you the link to it and you can put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll pop that link in the show notes. And before I let you go, I would love for you to share with the listeners what your biggest piece of advice is to go out and create a life you love.
Mm. This isn't as tactical as maybe you would like, but it's certainly sobering. There's a phrase that I've been thinking a lot about, and it's time is the only currency we spend without knowing the remaining balance. We have no idea how much we have left. Jenny, I could have 60 minutes or I could have 60 years. So it's very important for me to not waste it on silly, frivolous things. Show up in each moment like it matters, like it might be your last. Okay. Go all in on your relationships, on your career, all those different things because we don't know how much time we have left.
Yeah, that is the perfect, powerful way to end it. So thank you so, so much for joining me on the show today.
It's been an honor and a privilege, Jenny. Thank you for having me.